Okay, so for my fourth and final part, I'm going to be talking about the strategy patterns that I had ended up making for this project. Starting off will be the game manager strategies. So we'll start off with the base. So in the base, it just gets the classes that it needs, but it calls a virtual void execute, which gets the parameters of pointing to the ship, other, and mush other, and those are basically used in the player mode or the attractor mode. In player, nothing really happens because it just gets a pointer to the ship because you're controlling everything at that point. But in attractor mode, this is where the meat of this stuff happens. It basically takes in the execute function, where this is what it does everything inside here, and basically what the execute does is when execute runs, it switches it to the player mode. So there's a bunch of code, and there'll be a lot of include statements inside in the CPP, so that when you go from attractor to the CPP or attractor to player, it sets everything correctly. So there's the bunch of headers that I was talking about, and then it just has the constructor, destructor, and then execute. And then basically it's here, it says if the number 1 is pressed, which is what switches you to the player 1 mode, the pointer to ship creates the player strat, so that you're now in the player strategy. Mush other calls kill all the mushrooms. Mush placement grid, so you place another whole mushroom grid, so you have a new randomized field. The spider factory calls kill all spiders. Scorpion kills all the scorpions. Flea kills all fleas. And the 2 centipede ones kills the heads and the bodies respectively. From there, you want to I start the wave and reset the timers on both the scorpion and the spider so that they're back at 0. And the game manager gets set to the player strategy, and then the score manager resets the score. And then the sound manager plays the loud strat. So that's how the loud gets turned on. So that is the game manager strategy. Next is my sound strategy. This one's a bit long, but it's mainly got nothing in it. The header just calls virtual void for pointer to noise. Here it just calls those functions for play and stop. In quiet, it's basically the same as the other thing besides noise, arrow, stop. So it's to stop the noise. But in loud, it takes all the stuff and it just says to play and to stop for the respective stuff. This one was fairly easy and self-explanatory. I know this video is going to be a lot shorter than the other ones, but it was just the strategy patterns that I had to talk about. And then AI movement. Let's see, death stretch, ship base. Do I have enough? Okay, I can start with the CPU. So the AI movement here, there's a little bit more because I needed to do an update, which basically was just the way that I had mine set up, that I had to do a little bit of a workaround to get that to work correctly. But in the CPP here, it basically just, in the update, it's so it knows if that, what was it? Gets the X position, it checks like if it's hitting the window or anything, and then it's basically so that during the AI, it will bounce in a diamond up and down like I had showed, and that way you keep on, it just keeps on bouncing through that respective direction. It was relatively easy to set up. In the death strat, here is where you set the player Boolean strat to be true or false. That way you know what way to go. If it's the player, it's set to true. If it's not, then it's false. So there's the pointer to the ship, and then in the update, it gets the frames, and if the player strat is true, then it sets it to true. If it's false, it becomes AI. And that's about it. That's how the player can die and then come back with the lives every single time. Ship base. So the base for these 3 derived class just sets the player strat and then has an update. And then in here is basically just saying not to use any of these things because it's doing it all in the CPP and the H for that. And then in the ship one, it just has the update and destroy. Same thing as before with the pointer to the ship. The pointer to the ship, and then the impulses let you move to the keyboards, and this is why the impulses were needed before, so that you can move within the ship strategy. And besides all that, that is all the files for my Centipede game. I'm now gonna just leave it on this screen and go to the Word document so I can double check to make sure that I talked about everything. Let's see, they have 4 lives. So overall, I enjoyed Centipede as a project. I thought it was fun. I thought I learned a lot out of it. I know I didn't get every single thing for the game, and there was still a couple of bugs in mine at the end, but overall I think that um, it was something that was both fun to work on and challenging enough to learn all of these strategy patterns. I talked about the strategy pattern, the observer pattern, which is the same as the listener, I believe, which was when it gets called. The bullet was a listener. Basically, it checks for things to happen and then it does it. So, like the bullet, or when it checks if the positions are empty to whether or not destroy one or put a mushroom down. Simple factory for game. I have a lot of factories for the mushrooms and all of those they're also singletons. The singletons I showed that they were there. Observer pattern I just talked about. The explosion I talked about. Even though it's not made with the thing and it just makes a new one every time, that was how I ended up doing my explosion. I apologize that it is not with a recycling pool. The blaster is created with a recycling pool. Or not the blaster, the blaster does not have one. It is just it creates new ones and destroys them upon them dying. But it does change modes between AI and player. Let's see what else. Other than that, I believe I had covered everything. I went through all of the files and talked about what each of them did. The critter generators, the wave control. The fly wade was just stuff that I had. So that was nothing too different. Mushroom housekeeps itself. That was where I had all the destroy functions and stuff. The mushrooms can be recycled and all that. I talked about HUD and scores there, minus the few little hiccups that I had. Same with Sound Manager. But besides everything else, I believe that everything was there and it works, and the game can be played in a loop, minus the two. What's it called? The 2 times which it can crash, which is if a player dies in attractor mode and then you technically gain control over the player, but if you push 1 to go to a player, even though you already have control of it, it still thinks you're in attractor mode and it will crash the game. And that iterator error that I talked to you about will crash the game on close, but only on close. And besides that, everything is there. Thank you very much. I enjoyed the class a lot. This is my final sprint. Thank you.